In this video, I'm going to be going over my process for drawing a fruit in general, and in this case, a pear specifically. We're going to begin with a study of the proportions of the pear before diving into the rendering phase where we'll give life to the shapes with value. In the early moments of this drawing, we want to establish a relationship between the height, width, and volume of the pear, as well as the interrelationships of the smaller proportions within. By the way, the tools I'll be using to complete this drawing are my graphite pencils, kneaded eraser, pencil eraser, and a white piece of paper. A big part of how we will construct this drawing is through the use of angle breaks. This conceptual tool is what will allow us to simplify our subject and elaborate on its construction and gesture. An angle break is basically a simplified version of a curve that consists of straight lines. Now, as I make these marks, I'll periodically engage in some comparative measurements, wherein I create a unit of measurement like the top half of a pear and see how many times that goes into the bottom half, for example. In this case, the bottom portion is roughly 3 times the length of the top, so I'll eyeball the remainder and make a best guess. At this juncture, I have enough of a scaffolding to begin to add value. Firstly, we have to consider the direction of the light source, which appears to be coming from the top left-hand corner. The light hits the pear and creates both a form shadow and a cast shadow, the form shadow being the shadow on the parts of the pear facing away from the light source. The cast shadow, on the other hand, is the shadow cast by the form of the pear on the surface that it's resting on. The farther the cast shadow edge from the form that is casting it, the softer the shadow edge will be. This phenomenon is not as apparent in this particular photograph, but it is something to look out for in general. In blocking our shadow, I will purposely ignore the variations and create one unified value for all the shadow shapes. I want to move progressively from simple to complex, and I have to start here. Keeping a light hand and using my B-grade pencils, I'll fill in the shadow shapes we constructed earlier with an even and unified tone. To produce accurate values and form, it is important that we see past the details and complexities of nature and distill it into its more simplified form to better express it. As shadows established, I'll begin to add our darkest halftones to model the form. It's a good idea to go from dark to light so you can better track the progression of your tones and maintain a value hierarchy. After that, I'll add one more base value for our lightest lights, and our blocking is essentially finished. From this point on, every area I work in, I will attempt to take to a finish, looking carefully at my reference to capture the essence of the form before adding any details. In the shadows on the pear, the small shadow up here has less contrast than the shadow shape towards the bottom, and softer edges in this region than in that. I will begin by defining my core shadow before building up the reflected light, making sure it's lighter than the core. The line separating shadow from light is known as the bedbug line, and it is from this point I will begin to turn the form with my darkest halftones before moving into the center light. I try to keep my pencil strokes consistent, whether I'm hatching, cross-hatching, or scribbling. I'm also squinting my eyes to better see the halftone shapes. I don't just want amorphous blobs of value everywhere. I want a level of specificity in the shapes, without, of course, hard edges. Soft but specific is the goal. Once I have the base values for the darkest halftone, I return to that bedbug line with a B pencil and add an intermediate value between the shadow and halftone to soften that transition even more. Now is the time to transition to our lighter halftones. I'll be using mostly my 2H and 4H pencils to gradate the values from lighter to darker. Intermittently, I'll use my kneaded eraser to pick out the little dark spots that muddy up the tone. Squint your eyes often, step back and consider the major planes of this fruit as you move along in the picture. I'll return back to my shadow values at some point when I realize they've gotten too light relative to my light shape. Those families should be kept separate at all times if we are to preserve the illusion of three-dimensionality. Let's not forget the cast shadow. It's among some of the darkest values in our drawing, with the part proximal to the pear darker and with sharper edges. As we approach the conclusion of the drawing, take some time to meditate on the work you've done so far, your areas of improvement, and aspects of the drawing you liked. Even in this humble pear, there is so much you can learn about making pictures. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.